In this video, we're going to take a brief look at how symbolic interactionism would approach the study of, say, racism and prostitution. Let's talk a bit about racism. In looking at racism, symbolic interactionism would look at the symbols of racism and talk about symbols. Some symbols are going to be pretty obvious. Objects. Remember, objects are a category. If a person is wearing a Nazi swastika pin on their shirt, we would say this is an obvious symbol of racism because the Nazi swastika represents, Nazism and a very prejudicial racist thought and behavior. So that would be an easy one. But symbolic interactionism would also look at the language that people use and groups use. For instance, is a person or a group, are they using racial slurs? If a group or a person is using racial slurs, yes, obviously we would say that's an example of racism. For instance, several years ago, I asked my class to go to a conservative website and to look for their views on illegal immigration and tell me if there was any racist language. Now, this group did not use what I would call any obvious racial slurs, but I thought in their language there was racism. And I wanted the students to notice a particular word and how it was used. And here's the word. The word is spawn. Think of the word spawn. On this conservative website, they said something to this effect, that illegal immigrants come to the United States and they spawn babies. Now think about this. When we're describing people having babies, do we say Susie is spawning a baby? No, Susie's giving birth. We don't say Susie is spawning a baby. But this group said illegal immigrants come to the United States and they spawn babies. When I read this, to me, I thought this was racist. Because what this group is doing is using, to me, a word spawn that I think is rather derogatory to describe giving birth. So I thought that was an example of racist language. Now, there are other ways that we can look at racism using symbolic interactionism. One of them is the use of gestures. In college, a professor told us the following story. It's a very interesting story. His mom worked at a department store that sold clothing to young children. They called it the boys department. And they sold clothing to children, boys who were like in elementary school. And the sales ladies who worked there got paid a salary plus commission. So this professor's mother, she got paid, her salary plus a commission. Now, she was doing really well. And one of the reasons she was doing really well is that the black mothers always asked her to help them find clothing and jackets for their young boys. And this actually had started to create a problem, and this is how it came to the attention of the professor. The problem was that the other sales ladies complained that this woman, the professor's mother, must have been saying something bad about them because the black mothers rarely, if ever, asked for any of them to help them. They waited for the professor's mom. The professor told his mom to just ask one of the mothers, "Why is it you wait for me?" So she did. She did this, and she told the professor the following story. She said that she asked this woman that she knew well, "Why is it you wait for me?" And the black mother said, "Let me show you." So here's what happened. The woman, the black mother, went over and asked one of the other sales ladies to help her. They went out and they found a jacket for the little boy the mother had with her. And the mother went over and she took the jacket off her little boy. The sales lady handed her the jacket. The mom put the new jacket on the little boy, straightened it, turned it around, and the mom and the sales lady looked at the jacket and kind of decided whether it fit or not. And then the black mother went over to the professor's mom and said, "Can you help me?" And again, the mom and the professor's mom found a jacket for the little boy. The professor's mom went over to the little boy, took off the jacket he had on, put on the jacket that the mom and her had found, and put it on the little boy, straightened it up, and was turning the little boy around. And then all of a sudden, it hit the professor's mom what the difference was, and probably why the black mothers always asked for her. And what was the difference? The difference was the professor's mother put the jacket on the boy, turned the boy around, straightened the jacket up. The professor's mother was touching the little boy, standing next to the boy, while the mom took a good look at the boy. And the other sales ladies were not doing that. They were handing the jacket to the mom, letting the mom put the jacket on the boy and straighten it up. The other sales ladies were not touching the boys. The black mothers were noticing that these other sales ladies apparently, here's a gesture, were not touching or getting close to their children. And think about it, folks. If people don't get close to you and they don't touch you, do you start thinking that maybe they don't like you or they're afraid of you or something's wrong, right? And this is an example of how symbolic interactionism and the use of this category of symbols, gestures, might look at racism. Touch, how close we get to another group, says something about maybe what we think and how we feel. Now let's change gears for a second and let's look at how symbolic interactionism might approach the study or the behavior of prostitution. Well, simply at first, symbolic interactionism might look at the symbols of prostitution. How does a person let people know they're a prostitute? Well, easy way here is how the prostitute dresses. They dress in real sexy fashion, etc. Yeah, the use of the objects of clothing would be one. Symbolic interactionism would also look at the rituals of prostitution. A ritual is how we carry out behavior, how we go about it. Remember, symbolic interactionism looks at the everyday lives of people. So the symbolic interactionist might look at how the prostitute and the customer arrange their deal in terms of what they're going to do and the cost and things like that. Symbolic interactionism, as you know, also in studying the everyday lives of people, looks at a concept, we call it dramaturgy. It's in your reading. Remember, we're actors and actors upon a stage. And if we're actors and actors upon a stage trying to portray an image of ourselves, well, how do prostitutes justify their image? Symbolic interactionism would probably talk about this. And what we find is that prostitutes often justify their behavior by saying things like this. I saw this in an interview. One prostitute said that, look, she feels that she's not different from women out there who might date and marry a man because he's wealthy. In other words, this woman who was being interviewed, who's a prostitute, said, look, women out there date and marry men for money. She said, some women do that. She says, how am I different? I'm sort of dating a man for money. So you see how this prostitute was thinking in a way that justified the behavior. One prostitute that I listened to in an interview said that women who worked the streets and worked the bars were whores, but she was not. This woman said she was a very high class, escort prostitute, and that she wasn't a whore because she didn't have sex with every man that came along. She was selective. But she said the women who worked the bars and the streets, they would have sex with anybody who paid them. So this woman justified her behavior by saying she was selective. And this is something that symbolic interactionism would look at, because this is sort of looking at the everyday lives of people and how people sort of justify and explain to themselves their behavior. So this is how symbolic interactionism would look at racism and prostitution, just a little glance of how it would look at these two behaviors.